There's a moment that happens in every trade, a split second where fear and greed both speak at once. Fear says, get out before it gets worse. Greed says, hold on for more. And you freeze, or you act from whichever voice screams loudest. And later, whichever choice you made feels wrong. If you got out, it rallied without you. If you stayed in, it tanked. You can't win because you're playing the wrong game. The psychology principle I'm about to share doesn't help you make better split-second decisions. It eliminates the split second entirely. It removes the moment where fear and greed compete. And when that moment disappears, so does the internal war that's been destroying your trading. Here's how. You've been trying to overcome fear and greed through willpower, discipline, and mental toughness. You've been treating them as character flaws that need to be conquered, weaknesses that need to be strengthened, and it's exhausting. Every day is a battle. Every trade is a war between what you know you should do and what your emotions are screaming at you to do. And you're losing more often than you're winning. And the worst part is that you think it's your fault. You think if you were just stronger, more disciplined, better somehow, you wouldn't feel these things so intensely. But here's what's actually happening. Fear and greed aren't the problem. They're symptoms of a deeper misunderstanding about how your brain processes uncertainty. You've been fighting the messengers while ignoring the message. And the message is this. Your nervous system believes trading is dangerous, not intellectually. You know it's just numbers on a screen. You understand the risk you're taking. You know logically that a losing trade won't kill you. But biologically, your threat detection system has categorized trading as a survival situation. And until you address that core miscategorization, no amount of discipline will make fear and greed go away. The one psychology principle that conquers fear and greed is this: probabilistic thinking at the identity level. Not just understanding probability intellectually, not just knowing that you have an edge, but embodying it so deeply that your nervous system stops treating individual trades as threats. When you truly internalize that any single trade is meaningless within a series, your brain stops activating fear and greed for each one. They become irrelevant because the thing they're designed to protect you from, catastrophic singular outcomes, no longer exists in your reality. This is completely different from every other approach you've heard. Every other method tries to manage, control, or overcome fear and greed through techniques and tactics. Breathing exercises, positive affirmations, risk management rules. And those things might help a little bit, but they don't address the root cause. This approach dissolves fear and greed by changing what your brain believes trading actually is. It's not behavior modification, it's identity, transformation. And once your identity shifts from person risking something precious on each trade to person executing a probability-based process, fear and greed lose their grip naturally. Not because you've fought them and won, but because the conditions that create them have changed. You'll finally stop fighting yourself. You'll understand that you're not weak for feeling fear or greedy for wanting more. You're human, and your biology is working perfectly. The relief comes from discovering that you don't need to conquer these emotions. You need to give your nervous system different information. And that's something you can actually do. That's something within your control. Let me start with a story that's going to help you see your own trading in a completely different light. I want you to imagine two people learning to walk a tightrope. They're both beginners, same age, same physical ability, same training. They're both walking on the exact same rope, same thickness, same length, same tension. Everything about the rope is identical. But there's one critical difference in their environment. The first person is walking across a canyon. The rope is stretched between two cliffs, and below them, 100 feet down, are jagged rocks. Sharp, unforgiving rocks that would kill them instantly if they fell. The second person is walking across the exact same rope, but this rope is suspended just 2 feet above a thick, soft gymnastics mat. The kind of mat that's designed to catch people when they fall. Now watch what happens. The person above the canyon is terrified. Every single wobble triggers a wave of panic. Their muscles tense. Their breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Every step requires enormous concentration, enormous effort. They're moving slowly, carefully, and the whole time fear is screaming in their head, "Don't fall, don't fall, don't fall." And if they happen to start walking well, if they start to get confident, if they make it halfway across, another voice starts whispering, "Greed. You're doing great. You've got this. Go faster. Take bigger steps. Show everyone how good you are." And that greed, that overconfidence, that's often when they lose their balance and fall. The second person, 2 feet above the mat, is having a completely different experience. They're focused, yes. They're paying attention to their technique, but they're relaxed. They can wobble, and it's okay. They can experiment with their balance. They can try different foot positions. If they start to fall, they catch themselves or they land on the mat, and they climb back up and try again. Fear is quiet because the stakes are low. The consequences of falling are minimal. A little embarrassment maybe, but no real danger. And greed is quiet too because there's nothing to win except skill, except learning, except improvement. They're not trying to prove anything. They're just practicing. Same rope, same skill requirement. Completely different emotional experience. Why? Because the meaning of falling is different. For the person above the canyon, falling means death. For the person above the mat, falling means learning. And your emotions respond to meaning, not to facts. Now, here's what's really important. You're not actually on either of these ropes. Not really. You think you're above the canyon. Your nervous system has categorized trading as a canyon situation. It believes that every trade is life or death, that every loss is catastrophic, that every decision could end you. But you're actually 2 feet above the mat. A losing trade doesn't kill you. It doesn't end your career. It doesn't destroy your life. It doesn't mean anything except that this particular instance of your probabilistic edge didn't work out this time. That's all it means, but your brain doesn't know that. Your brain has miscategorized trading. It's put trading in the same category as crossing a canyon on a tightrope when trading actually belongs in the category of practicing on a mat. And this miscategorization is what generates fear and greed. Fear is trying to keep you from falling to your death. Greed is trying to get you across the canyon as fast as possible before something goes wrong. Both emotions make perfect sense if you're above a canyon. But you're not above a canyon. You're above a mat. The psychology principle that conquers fear and greed is teaching your nervous system the truth. You're 2 feet above a mat. And you don't teach this through affirmations. You don't teach it through positive thinking or visualization or telling yourself to be confident. You teach it through repeated experiential evidence that shows your brain, "Look, I took this trade, it lost. And I'm still here. Nothing catastrophic happened. The world didn't end. I didn't die. My account is still active. I can take another trade." The mat caught me. Every trade you take according to your process, regardless of the outcome, is evidence. Evidence that trading isn't the canyon. Evidence that losses aren't fatal. Evidence that your nervous system can recategorize this activity from survival threat to probability game. And when that recategorization happens, when your brain finally understands that you're above a mat and not above a canyon, fear and greed quiet down naturally. Not because you've conquered them, not because you've developed superhuman discipline, but because the situation they were designed for no longer exists in your brain's understanding of reality. Let me give you another story, a real one from my own experience, because I think this is going to help you understand how this principle actually works in practice. Years ago, I was talking to a casino manager. I was fascinated by gambling and probability, and I wanted to understand how someone could watch millions of dollars change hands every single night without losing their mind. So I asked him directly. I said, "Doesn't it bother you when someone wins big at your tables, when someone hits a jackpot or has an incredible run at blackjack? Doesn't greed make you want to stop the game, change the rules, do something to prevent that loss?" And on the flip side, when the casino is losing for hours, when multiple tables are paying out, when it feels like everything is going against the house, doesn't fear creep in? Don't you start to worry? He looked at me like I'd asked a very strange question, like I'd asked him if he was afraid of the rain or something equally absurd. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "I don't care about tonight. I don't care about this week. I don't even care about this month. I care about thousands of nights. We have an edge. It's a small edge. On roulette, it's about 5%. On some other games, it's less than 1%. But it's real and it's consistent. And across thousands of hands, tens of thousands of spins, hundreds of thousands of dice rolls, that edge pays us. Reliably. Predictably. But any single night? Meaningless. We could lose. We often do. Some nights we lose a lot. Doesn't matter. And I just sat there staring at him because I realized something profound. He wasn't experiencing fear or greed because he wasn't thinking in terms of individual events. His identity wasn't tied to tonight's results. He wasn't a person trying to win tonight. He was a probability-based business operator. Someone who understood that his edge existed across a series, not in individual instances, and that identity made fear and greed completely irrelevant. Then he said something even more profound. He leaned forward and he said, "You want to know who does experience fear and greed? The players. The ones losing money at my tables. They care desperately about this hand, this spin, this roll. Their emotions are on fire, because to them, each event means something. Each win means they're smart, lucky, chosen. Each loss means they're stupid, unlucky, cursed. Each event is about their identity, about who they are, and that's why they lose. Because those emotions, that fear and greed, make them deviate from optimal strategy, make them bet more when they're winning, chase losses when they're losing, make irrational decisions based on what just happened instead of what the probabilities actually are." And I understood. The traders experiencing crushing fear and overwhelming greed were doing the exact same thing as those casino players. They were making each trade mean something about themselves. Each win was proof they were good traders. Each loss was proof they were failing. Each trade was identity relevant. It said something about who they were, about their competence, about their worth, about their future. And when something is identity relevant, your nervous system treats it as a survival situation. Because in the ancient brain, in the brain that evolved over millions of years, threats to identity are threats to survival. If the tribe thinks you're incompetent, if the group decides you're worthless, you get expelled. And in the ancient environment, expulsion from the tribe meant death. You couldn't survive alone. So your brain has learned to treat identity threats the same way it treats physical threats, with fear, with the activation of your entire stress response system. And trading, when you make it identity relevant, when you let each trade prove or disprove something about who you are, triggers that system constantly. Trade after trade after trade, your nervous system is responding to perceived survival threats, and it's trying to protect you the only ways it knows how. Through fear that makes you avoid risk, through greed that makes you try to secure resources while you can. The psychology principle is this: when you shift your identity from person trying to win this trade to person executing a probabilistic edge across a series, fear and greed lose their fuel. Because individual trades stop meaning anything about you. They're just data points in a series. Just like the casino manager doesn't take tonight's results personally, You stop taking this trade's results personally. And when results aren't personal, when they're not about your identity, emotions quiet down. Not because you've suppressed them, not because you've overcome them through willpower, because the trigger for them has been removed. So how does this actually work? What's the mechanism? Let me break this down because I think understanding the mechanism is what makes this principle practical instead of just theoretical. Your nervous system has one primary job: keep you alive. That's it. Everything else is secondary. And to do that job, your brain is constantly scanning your environment for threats. This happens automatically, unconsciously, faster than thought. And threats come in two basic categories: physical threats, things that can hurt your body; predators, starvation, injury, illness; and social threats, things that can damage your position in the group: loss of status, rejection, humiliation, expulsion from the tribe. Modern humans rarely face immediate physical survival threats. You're not worried about being eaten by a tiger. But social and identity threats? Those still activate the same survival circuitry. When something threatens your identity, your sense of who you are, your competence, your worth, your place in the social hierarchy, your brain responds as if your life is in danger. Because historically, socially, it was. Now watch what happens in trading. You take a trade. If it wins, you feel validated. You feel good. You think, I'm good at this. I'm smart. I know what I'm doing. I'm a successful trader. The win validates your identity. If the trade loses, you feel threatened. You think, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I'm going to fail. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. The loss threatens your identity. The trade becomes identity relevant. It becomes about who you are. And when something is identity relevant, fear and greed automatically activate. Fear protects you from the loss of identity. It says, don't take the trade. You might be proven wrong. You might have to face the fact that you're not as good as you think you are. Stay safe. Don't risk your identity. Greed tries to secure identity enhancement. It says, take more risk. Take a bigger position. You might be proven right even more. You might be able to prove once and for all that you're excellent at this. Secure your identity while you can. Both emotions are serving the same master: your identity, your sense of self, your brain's understanding of who you are and whether that identity is secure or threatened. And as long as individual trades can threaten or validate your identity, you will experience fear and greed. There's no way around it. Your brain is doing what it's designed to do. The principle that dissolves this is actually simple. Trades can't threaten or validate your identity if your identity isn't based on individual trades. If your identity is I am someone who executes a probabilistic edge, then each trade is just an execution, one instance in a series. It can't prove or disprove anything about you because the edge only shows up across hundreds of trades. 1 trade, 5 trades, 10 trades, these prove nothing. They're noise, they're randomness playing out. The only thing that matters is whether you executed your process. And if you did, then your identity is secure regardless of the outcome. This shift from results-based identity to process-based identity removes the identity threat from trading. And when there's no identity threat, there's no survival response. Fear and greed quiet down naturally because they have nothing to protect you from and nothing to secure for you. Your identity is already secure. It's based on something you control, your execution, not on something you don't control. The outcome. Now let me talk about another mechanism that's creating fear and greed in your trading. And this one is really important because it's so subtle that most traders never see it. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. That's one of its primary functions. It learns from experience. It identifies patterns and creates rules. Touch fire. Get burned. Learn that fire is dangerous. Avoid fire in the future. See a snake, feel fear, run away, survive. Learn that snakes are dangerous. Avoid snakes in the future. This learning system kept your ancestors alive for millions of years. But here's the problem. This learning system is designed to learn from single events. One time touching fire is enough. You don't need to touch fire 100 times to learn it's dangerous. One time is sufficient because the consequence is immediate, clear, and consistent. Fire always burns. Snakes are always dangerous. The pattern is reliable. But trading isn't like that. In trading, single events are meaningless. A winning trade doesn't mean your analysis was good. A losing trade doesn't mean your analysis was bad. The outcome of any individual trade is largely random within the boundaries of your edge. You might have perfect analysis and lose. You might have terrible analysis and win. Individual outcomes don't teach you anything reliable about your process. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain treats each trade as a learning event. Win, and it learns, this was good. Do more of this, maybe even do more of it. Take bigger risks because this clearly works. Lose, and it learns this was bad. Avoid this. Protect yourself. This is dangerous. And both lessons are completely wrong. Wrong because the sample size is 1. Wrong because individual outcomes in probabilistic systems don't predict future outcomes. Wrong because your brain is applying single-event learning to a multi-event probability game. This is why one big win can create massive greed. Your brain learned from that one event that taking big risks pays off, that this strategy works, that you should do more of it. It's trying to help you. It's trying to identify a successful pattern. But the lesson is false because it's based on a sample size of 1. And this is why one bad loss can create crippling fear. Your brain learned from that one event that this activity is dangerous, that you could lose everything, that you need to be much more careful or maybe stop entirely. Again, it's trying to help you. It's trying to protect you from danger. But the lesson is false because it's based on one instance of a probabilistic outcome. Your brain is doing its job. It's learning from events. But it's learning the wrong lessons because it's treating trading like touching fire instead of like flipping a coin with a 60% edge. And those wrong lessons create wrong emotions. Fear from a single loss. Greed from a single win. Both are your brain trying to help based on incorrect pattern recognition. The psychology principle that addresses this is you must override your brain's single-event learning system with conscious series thinking. This doesn't happen automatically. It's not natural. Your brain will not naturally think in probabilities. You have to train it. You have to repeatedly, consistently, consciously remind it. This trade means nothing. The next 20 trades mean nothing. The edge shows up across hundreds of trades. Individual outcomes are noise, and you train it not through affirmations, not through telling yourself this over and over, though that can help. You train it through experience, by taking trades according to your process regardless of how the last trade went. By treating wins and losses identically in terms of your emotional response and your next action. By creating experiential evidence that individual outcomes don't predict future outcomes, that the trade after a big win isn't more likely to win, that the trade after a big loss isn't more likely to lose, by proving to your brain through repeated experience that the pattern it's trying to identify doesn't actually exist at the level of individual trades. Slowly, with enough repetition, your brain starts to get it, starts to recategorize trading from single-event survival situation to multi-event probability game. And when that recategorization happens, fear and greed based on individual outcomes begin to fade. Because your brain stops trying to learn from each trade, stops trying to identify patterns in the noise, stops treating each outcome as meaningful information about danger or opportunity. Now let me talk about something that I think is at the root of both fear and greed, and that most people never recognize. Both emotions are seeking the same thing. Certainty. Fear wants certainty that you won't lose. Greed wants certainty that you will win. Both are trying to eliminate uncertainty, and trading can never provide certainty about individual trades, ever. That's the fundamental nature of probabilistic outcomes. You cannot know whether this specific trade will win or lose. You can know that across a series, an edge will produce predictable results. But this trade? Unknown, uncertain, always. But your brain craves certainty. Uncertainty registers as threat in your nervous system, because in the ancient environment, uncertainty was dangerous. When you didn't know where the predator was, when you didn't know if there would be food tomorrow, when you didn't know if the other tribe was friendly or hostile, that uncertainty kept your ancestors hyper-vigilant and stressed, because uncertainty could kill you. So your brain is designed to resolve uncertainty as quickly as possible, to turn the unknown into the known, to create certainty even when certainty doesn't exist. And when your brain experiences prolonged uncertainty without resolution, it escalates emotional intensity. It turns up the volume on fear and greed. Both are trying to force you to take action that will create certainty. Any certainty, even bad certainty, is better than ongoing uncertainty. This is why traders make their worst decisions, not from stupidity, not from lack of discipline, from certainty seeking. They exit a winning trade early. Why? Because exiting creates the certainty of a win. It eliminates the uncertainty of will it keep going or will it reverse. It gives your brain resolution, certainty, relief from the stress of not knowing. They hold a losing trade too long. Why? Because as long as the trade is open, there's still uncertainty. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll break even. The moment you close it, you create the certainty of a realized loss. And your brain will avoid that certainty as long as possible, choosing the stress of ongoing uncertainty over the finality of certain loss. Both behaviors are certainty-seeking driven by a brain that can't tolerate sustained uncertainty. And both behaviors destroy your edge. Because your edge isn't based on exiting winners early or holding losers forever. Your edge is based on letting probability play out across a series, which requires tolerating massive amounts of uncertainty. The psychology principle that addresses this, and this is so important, is that certainty isn't found in individual trades. It's found in the edge. You can't be certain this trade will win, but you can be certain that across a series, an edge will produce predictable results. This is where real certainty lives, not in outcomes, but in process. Not in what will happen this time, but in what will happen over time. When you shift your certainty, seeking from will this trade win to am I executing my edge, your brain has something stable to grab onto, something predictable, something certain. And when your brain gets its certainty need met at the process level, it stops desperately seeking it at the outcome level. It stops trying to force resolution of individual trades. It can tolerate the uncertainty of this trade because it has certainty about the process. And when your brain can tolerate uncertainty at the trade level, fear and greed quiet down, because they're no longer needed to force certainty. Certainty already exists where it actually matters. Let me show you how this plays out in a pattern I see with almost every struggling trader. A pattern that creates a feedback loop that makes fear and greed worse and worse over time. It starts with a trade. The trade loses. Fear spikes. The loss feels significant, threatening, identity relevant. It feels like it means something about you. So next trade, you either skip it entirely because fear is screaming, "Don't risk it again," or you take it, but with a smaller position because fear is demanding you reduce your risk. That trade wins. But because your position was small, Because you reduced your risk out of fear, the win feels insufficient. It doesn't make up for the loss. You feel like you missed an opportunity. Greed spikes. Your brain says, I should have taken more. I need to make up for that loss. I need to prove I can win. Next trade, you overtrade. You take a bigger position than your rules allow. Greed is driving you to secure a win, to make up for lost ground, to prove something. That trade loses. And now the loss is bigger because your position was bigger. Fear spikes even higher than before. The cycle intensifies. Each emotional reaction creates the condition for the next emotional reaction. This is a feedback loop. And once you're in it, trying to think your way out doesn't work. Trying to control the emotions in the moment doesn't work. Because each trade continues to be identity relevant, continues to feel significant, continues to trigger the survival response. The psychology principle that breaks this loop is consistent position sizing and consistent execution, creating emotional neutrality over time. Not through suppressing emotions, through teaching your brain that nothing special is happening. When every trade is the same size, taken for the same reason, managed by the same rules, exited by the same criteria, your brain stops treating each one as a unique event requiring emotional attention. It starts to recognize a pattern, not a pattern in the outcomes, but a pattern in the execution. And that pattern is boring, predictable, routine. And boring is exactly what you want. Because boring means your brain has recategorized the activity from identity-relevant survival situation to routine process execution. And routine processes don't trigger fear and greed. You don't feel fear or greed when you brush your teeth. Not because teeth brushing is unimportant, but because it's routine, it's consistent. It's not connected to your identity, it's just something you do. The goal is to make trading feel like brushing your teeth. Not in terms of how much you care about it, not in terms of importance or engagement, but in terms of emotional neutrality. And you get there through relentless consistency that teaches your brain, this is routine, this is process. Individual instances don't matter. The pattern I'm looking for is in the execution, not the outcome. Now here is something that's going to sound completely backwards, but is actually crucial. The way to conquer fear and greed is to accept them completely, not to fight them, not to overcome them, to accept that they're present, valid, and trying to help. This is a paradox that confuses most traders. They think acceptance means giving in, letting the emotions control their behavior. But that's not what acceptance means. When you resist fear, when you think I shouldn't feel this, I need to be braver. What's wrong with me for feeling afraid? You create tension, internal conflict. And that tension is itself a form of threat. Your brain registers internal conflict as danger and responds by escalating the very emotion you're trying to suppress. You get more afraid of your fear. The fear intensifies because you're resisting it. When you feel ashamed of greed, when you think I shouldn't want more, I'm being greedy, I need to be more disciplined, you create conflict, judgment, and that judgment creates tension, and your brain responds to that tension by escalating the emotion. You feel more greedy because you're fighting greed. The emotion intensifies in response to your resistance. But when you accept them, when you can observe fear arising and think, there's fear doing its job, trying to protect me from perceived threat, without judgment, without resistance, just pure observation, something shifts. The emotion is allowed to exist without being fed by resistance. And emotions that aren't fed by resistance tend to move through and release naturally. They arise, they peak, they pass, like weather, like waves. They're temporary states, not permanent conditions. The psychology principle here is what you accept, you can observe. What you observe, you can understand. What you understand, you can work with. You can't work with fear and greed while you're fighting them, while you're resisting them, while you're ashamed of them, but you can work with them when you accept them as information. As messengers, as your nervous system doing its job based on its current understanding of what trading means. Fear tells you, my brain believes this is dangerous. Okay, what information can I give my brain to recategorize this? What experiential evidence can I provide that shows this isn't dangerous? Greed tells you, my brain believes there's a scarce opportunity I must seize right now. Okay, what information can I give my brain to understand that opportunities are abundant? That they come every day, that individual opportunities don't matter? Acceptance transforms fear and greed from enemies you must conquer into messengers you can learn from. Teachers showing you where your brain's understanding of trading is inaccurate. And that shift from fighting to understanding, from resisting to accepting, is where they lose their power over your behavior. Because you're no longer at war with yourself, you're working with yourself, with your design, with your nervous system. And that collaboration is so much more effective than conflict. So let me make this practical now. Let me give you the specific practices that implement this principle, that train your nervous system to recategorize trading, that shift your identity from outcome-based to process-based, that create the emotional neutrality that allows you to execute your edge without interference from fear and greed. The first practice is what I call the identity statement ritual. Before every trading session, before you look at a single chart, before you check prices, before you do anything trading related, I want you to speak this statement out loud, not in your head. Out loud so your ears hear your voice saying these words. I am a probability-based process executor. Individual trades are meaningless. My edge exists across the series. This trade, whatever happens, tells me nothing about my competence or future. Say it out loud. Let your brain hear your own voice declaring this identity. You're priming your nervous system with a specific frame for interpreting everything that's about to happen. You're telling your brain how to categorize the activity you're about to engage in. And your brain responds powerfully to identity declarations spoken in your own voice. It takes them seriously. It uses them as instructions for how to interpret experience. This seems simple, almost too simple to matter. But I'm telling you, this practice alone will start to shift how you experience trading emotionally, because you're giving your brain a frame. And that frame, I am a process executor, not an outcome seeker, is the frame that makes fear and greed irrelevant. Do this every single day, before every session. Make it non-negotiable. This is how you prime your identity. The second practice is the uniform position size commitment. For the next 30 trades, not 30 days, 30 trades, use identical position sizes. Exactly the same size every single time. No scaling up when you feel confident. No scaling down when you feel uncertain. No adjusting based on how strong the setup looks or how the last trade went. Identical. Every single trade. This creates experiential evidence for your brain that no individual trade is special. Because when position size varies based on feelings, based on confidence, based on how much you want this trade to win, your brain learns that some trades matter more than others, which means those trades become identity relevant, which triggers fear and greed more intensely for those trades. But when position size is uniform, when it's mechanical and consistent, your brain learns these are all the same. None of them matter more than any other. I'm not making special bets. I'm executing a consistent process. And that learning is what rewires the fear-greed response, because identity relevance decreases when every instance is treated identically. The third practice is post-trade neutrality. After every trade, winning or losing, say out loud, one instance in a series, meaningless. That's it. Don't analyze the trade in that moment. Don't celebrate the win. Don't regret the loss. Don't think about what you could have done differently. Just declare one instance in a series meaningless and move on. This teaches your brain to release the trade emotionally, to let it go, to not hold on to it as evidence of anything. Because the holding, the rumination, the emotional processing of individual trades, that's what makes them identity relevant. That's what trains your brain to care about individual outcomes. When you consciously release each trade as meaningless, when you declare it explicitly, you're training series thinking. You're teaching your nervous system, we don't process these individually, we process them collectively. And that training, over hundreds of repetitions, is what shifts your identity from outcome-based to process-based. This practice is so simple, but don't underestimate it. The conscious verbal release of individual trades is incredibly powerful for emotional neutrality. The fourth practice is the fear-greed observation log. When fear or greed arise, and they will, don't fight them. Don't act on them either. Instead, pause. Open a document on your computer or a notebook and write. Fear present or greed present. My brain believes, and then you write specifically what your brain believes in that moment. The belief driving this is, and you identify the underlying belief about trading or identity. The truth is, and you state the probabilistic truth that contradicts the belief. For example, fear present. My brain believes this trade will expose me as incompetent if it loses. The belief driving this is that individual trades validate or invalidate my ability as a trader. The truth is that any single trade is meaningless within a probabilistic edge across hundreds of trades. One trade proves nothing about my competence. You're not suppressing the emotion. You're not trying to make it go away through willpower. You're translating it. You're making explicit what your brain believes and contrasting it with probabilistic reality. And that contrast, repeated over time, is what updates your brain's beliefs, which changes the emotions that flow from those beliefs. Because emotions aren't random, they're generated by beliefs. Change the belief and the emotion changes automatically. The fifth practice is series visualization. Once a week, sit down and review your last 20 trades as a single image. Create a spreadsheet or a visual chart that shows all 20 trades at once. Don't focus on individual trades. Don't think about the big winner or the frustrating loser. Look at the collective pattern. Look at the overall result. Look at the series as a unified whole. What's the total result across these 20 trades? What's the pattern of wins and losses? Does your edge show up when you look at the series? This trains your brain to think in series, to see trading as a long-form activity rather than a sequence of discrete events. And the more your brain sees the series as the unit of measurement, the less it cares about individual instances, which is exactly what dissolves fear and greed, caring less about individual outcomes because the series is what matters. These 5 practices, if you actually do them consistently, will rewire how your brain categorizes trading, will shift your identity from outcome-based to process-based, will create the emotional neutrality that allows fear and greed to quiet down naturally. Not overnight. This isn't magic, but steadily, gradually, naturally, over time. We started with a split second, that moment in every trade where fear and greed both speak at once and you're frozen between them, where you can't win no matter what you choose because whichever voice you listen to, you'll regret it later. You've been trying to make better decisions in that split second, trying to be braver, trying to be more disciplined, trying to overcome the emotions through force of will. But what we discovered is that the split second itself is the problem. The existence of that moment where fear and greed compete is evidence that your brain has miscategorized trading, has made individual trades identity relevant, has treated each outcome as a survival situation. And the psychology principle that conquers fear and greed doesn't help you navigate that split second better. It eliminates the split second entirely. When you shift your identity from outcome-based to process-based. When you teach your nervous system that you're 2 feet above a mat, not 100 feet above a canyon, when you train series thinking and probabilistic understanding at the identity level, individual trades stop being decision points loaded with emotional intensity. They become routine executions, simple implementations of a process. And the split second where fear and greed compete disappears because there's nothing to compete over. The trade isn't threatening your identity. It isn't validating your identity. It's just an instance in a series. The traders who seem fearless and unaffected by greed haven't overcome these emotions through superhuman discipline. They've dissolved them through understanding, through an identity shift that made individual outcomes irrelevant, through series thinking that removed the survival response from each trade. And you can do the same thing. Here's what you need to hear and believe at the deepest level. Fear and greed are not character flaws. They're not evidence that you're weak or broken or not cut out for trading. They are rational, appropriate responses to how your brain has categorized trading. Your nervous system is working perfectly. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's just operating on incorrect information. The moment you give it accurate information, the moment you shift your identity from outcome-based to process-based, the moment you teach it through repeated experience that individual trades aren't survival situations, fear and greed become irrelevant, not conquered, not overcome through willpower, irrelevant. Because the thing they're designed to protect you from, identity threat from singular events, no longer exists in your reality. You are not weak for feeling fear. You are human with a nervous system designed for survival. You are not broken for experiencing greed. You are human with a brain designed to secure resources and opportunities. These emotions aren't your enemies. They're information. They're telling you what your brain believes, and when you understand what they're telling you, you can give your brain new information, better information, accurate information. Your only job is to teach your nervous system through consistent, repeated experience that individual trades don't matter, that you're executing a probabilistic edge across a series, that your identity is based on process, not outcomes, that you're 2 feet above a mat, not 100 feet above a canyon. And when you do this, when you shift your identity, when you train series thinking, when you remove the identity threat from individual trades, fear and greed quiet down naturally. Trading becomes emotionally neutral, not boring, not disengaging, not unimportant, but neutral in the sense that individual outcomes don't hijack your nervous system anymore. Don't trigger survival responses. Don't create internal wars. You trade from clarity instead of emotion, from process instead of reactivity, from probability instead of certainty, seeking. And that's where consistent profitability lives, not in conquering fear and greed through heroic discipline, but in making them irrelevant through understanding what they are and what they're responding to. Through giving your brain accurate information about what trading actually is. A probability game that rewards process, not a survival situation that threatens identity. If this shifted something in you, if you see your own fear and greed differently now, let me know in the comments. Tell me what your brain has been believing about individual trades. Tell me how you've been making outcomes identity relevant. Tell me what clicked for you in this principle. I read every comment and I learned from your insights just as much as you might learn from mine. And if this approach to trading psychology resonates, if you want to keep exploring the mechanisms underneath the behavior, the beliefs underneath the emotions, subscribe to this channel. There is more of this depth coming. More principles that dissolve problems instead of fighting them. More understanding that creates change instead of effort that creates exhaustion. But right now, today, Go speak the identity statement. Go declare out loud who you are as a trader. A probability-based process executor for whom individual trades are meaningless. Let your brain hear that identity in your own voice. That's where the transformation begins, not in conquering emotions, but in shifting the identity that generates them. Fear and greed will always exist. They're part of being human, part of having a nervous system designed for survival. But they don't have to control your trading. The moment you stop making trades identity relevant, the moment you shift to series thinking, the moment you teach your brain that you're above a mat, not above a canyon, they become background noise instead of screaming voices demanding action. And in that quiet, you finally hear what trading actually is. A probability game that rewards consistent execution of an edge across a series. Not a survival situation that requires you to be perfect on every trade. Not an identity test that proves or disproves your worth with each outcome. Just a process, a routine, a series of identical executions that produce predictable results over time. Now go execute your edge with that clarity. Go be the process executor you actually are. Go show your nervous system through your actions that individual trades are meaningless instances in a meaningful series. That's where fear and greed lose their grip. That's where emotional neutrality lives. That's where consistent profitability becomes possible, not through conquering yourself, but through understanding yourself and working with your design instead of against it.